So good. All right. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. Well, we're going to start in on a new series, and the series is in the book of Philippians, and we're going to be there for 4 weeks heading into Advent. And for those who are not familiar with Advent, Advent is that season that prepares us for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Jesus entering in. So prior to that, at least in the United States, we find November to be the precursor to all things shopping. But it also is the precursor to Advent is Thanksgiving. And so I thought of all the books in the Bible that are most joyful, most thankful, the book of Philippians brings us there. So I know that there are things that bring me joy, and so I thought it would be good to just turn to the person next to you or someone near you, and what is the thing that brings you most joy on a day-to-day basis? On a day-to-day basis, what is that? And then secondly, can you recall the most joyful moment in your life? The most joyful moment in your life. So if you're married, you probably should tell your spouse, the day we married. But you can, if you want to use that as your default, you can say, there's that one, of course, and then there's the other. So go for it. I'll give you, let's take a couple of minutes to do that, to connect with one another on what joy is in our lives. So go ahead and turn and go for it. Translate in being with one another after this over cinnamon rolls. It could translate to having somebody over this week into your home and talking about those joyful places in your life. With Paul and this letter, Eugene Peterson, who's a noted author, theologian, he says this is Paul's happiest letter. And happiness is infectious. Before you've read a few lines from Philippians, we begin to feel the joy ourselves. The dance of words and the exclamations of delight have a way of getting into us. But happiness is not a word we can understand by looking it up in a dictionary. In fact, none of the qualities of the Christian life can be learned out of a book in and of itself. Something more like apprenticeship is required. Being around someone who out of years of devoted discipline shows us by his or her entire behavior what it is to be with Jesus. Moments of verbal instruction will certainly occur, but mostly an apprentice acquires skills by daily and intimate association with a master, picking up subtle but absolutely essential things such as timing and rhythm and touch. It's one thing to be a school teacher, which I am on every day of the week other than Saturdays and Sundays, and I have 6th and 7th graders, and some of them I'm having to remind them how to read a little bit. There's some poor reading that goes on. The other day we were talking about what was a verb in a sentence, and it was the sentence went like this: I am climbing a tree. And then they had to decide which of the words was a verb. And a few of them raised their hands on tree. And I looked at them and I said, have you ever been treed? Can you tree something? And it was just like, right? It's an action. And the Christian life oftentimes can be reduced by some to just finding the answers in a book and throwing answers at people. But the Christian life is really an action. It's an action that demonstrates our following after the Master, and the Master being Jesus. One of the things that's challenging about that is that Jesus isn't flesh and blood right here, right? So Jesus comes 2,000 years ago, born, Christmas, and lives. And at a certain point, he's taken into custody, and he's tried, and then he's crucified, and he's dead. He's buried. And then what we believe as Christ followers is that he was resurrected 3 days following. 40 days after that, he ascends into heaven, and we await a second coming. But in the meantime, how is it that we can follow? So in the book of Philippians, chapter 1, and that's where we'll find ourselves, verses 3 to 11. If you want to turn there with me, you can. I'll just read this passage for us. And it's going to be a little different this morning. I'm going to just kind of break it down verse by verse a little bit more than I might otherwise. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it out to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. It is right for me to feel this way about you, all of you, since I have you in my heart, and whether I am in chains or defending and confirming the gospel, all of you share in God's grace with me. God can testify how I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more and more in knowledge and in depth of insight, so that you may discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. What does that beginning part look like? I thank my God every time I remember you. So it comes to me that I go, who do I thank God for in my life? Who do you thank God for? And I don't really love challenges. I don't like it when people challenge me. It causes me to want to fight, and it feels confrontational. It makes me feel like I'm with my brothers and I'm being judged, whether I can whether I can measure up to that challenge. What I am more inclined for, and this is total like therapy thing for me, is that I love to be invited. Ask me. So I like to use that language with you, to invite you. Who was it who influenced you in your walk of faith? And you may be here this morning and go, I don't even really know what that walk of faith is. I've never said yes to Jesus, but I'm curious about him. And so you find yourself thinking, who is influencing me? And I'd invite you to connect to somebody, to that person that you perhaps know here who can walk you to the feet of Jesus, to offer his hand to you. So in thankfulness for myself, I can name two guys in particular. And I probably could name more, and I'm reticent to say any names because it's videoed and it'll be up on somewhere on the web, and these two guys will come across it, and maybe a couple of others will be like, dude, why did you not mention me? Well, I don't have time. But I want to name two. The first one is Dan Ernessy. And Dan was like, he was like hero status. He was that guy who you're like, that guy is so cool. I want to be like Dan. Dan, I was in high school at the time, and Dan was at the University of Washington. He played football for the Huskies. He was the starting center when they won the Orange Bowl in 1984, I think it was. And he was so good, and he was huge. I mean, back in '84, he wasn't as big as they are now, but goodness gracious, he was big. And in fact, there was some time where I got to hang out with him, like aside from like different things, and he actually had me doing some spotting for him when he was weightlifting, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he can. But it wasn't that he was a football player. It wasn't that he was successful. It was that when I hung out with Dan, I knew that his first priority was that he loved Jesus. He was the first cool guy who wasn't afraid to say that he loved Jesus. The second was Tim McIntosh. And Tim spoke at a youth retreat once that I was at, and he got up front and he would do this, and his hands would move, and he would take different spots, and he would be dramatic. He would act out the parts of the text. And I was like, I want to experience the Bible the way this guy does. It comes alive. You know, sometimes you can come to this text and it can be just sort of, old or hard to understand. But you find that reading and it just goes, yeah. So I said to Tim, after hearing him speak, I said, my wife and I are thinking of going to grad school. If I go to grad school in the city that you live, would you meet with me once a week and mentor me? And he said, if you come to Vancouver, we will meet once a week. For 3 years, I met with Tim for coffee, and we talked about what I was learning in school, and I went to the church he was at, and sometimes when you see me preach, you might even see a little bit of Tim. You see, that's when you get close to somebody, you become a little bit like them. And when you become a little bit like someone who is a Christ follower, you become a little bit like Christ. And the key to this passage, though, isn't so much that it's individual. It's that Paul says, I thank God for you, the people. When was the last time you heard someone say, I am thankful for you, Crossroads Covenant Church? I can say that to you here this morning. I am thankful for you being present in this community to those around who need the hands and feet of Jesus. You have brought joy to people's lives. That common ground when people would come for coffee, the people who are given an opportunity to be baristas there and learn a skill, good work. The tots, I don't even know the names of things. There was the basics for babies. I mean, the people who came and were given free things so they could raise their children. Good job. Right? It's that history that you have that culminates, I think, in 2 weeks when we have our 13th birthday. Thank you for being present for 13 years. And who knows what the next 13 looks like. And it doesn't even really matter, but we're saying thank you right now for being present here in this community. I can look back and there are different groups of people who have met me. And I want to say thank you to the Well Covenant Church in Corvallis. I had a big biff in my life, and that is a huge understatement. I mean, I had made such a mess of such important things. My marriage was in trouble. My family was on the brink. And that community said, Bernd, we are going to stand with you. And not just them, but the conference and the denomination said, Bernd, hang in there. And when I couldn't walk, people carried me. I thank God for the church. And I know there are people who get hurt by the church. It happens because people make up the church. And people sometimes, but that's okay, right? Because it is the brokenness of our lives that allows the light of Christ to break through. We want to be that people. Confident. Where is our confidence? In the text, Paul says to his friends in Philippi, in verse 6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it out to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Have you ever thought that you as a Christ follower have a good work that was started in you? That there's something that in you God is working on, doing a work in you right now. So I was up there playing the drums, and I was 22, and I was playing with some guys who were playing some cards, and then they kicked out some guitars, and I was like, guys, can we do something that I can do? Like, can we go play some basketball or something? And they're like, why don't you learn an instrument? And I was like, dude, I am not learning an instrument. I'm 22. I'm way too old, right? That whole thing, like you learn it, you learn piano when you're 6, and like Trish took lessons when she was 6, and it's worked out well for her. So I was like, I can't do that. And they're like, yeah, you can. What would you like to play? And I said, well, I've always thought drummers are cool. So I had a friend. I said, hey, would you teach me how to do 2/4? 1, 2, 3, 4. So about 3 hours later, I was able to do that consecutively for about 4 times. And I was like, dude, I got this. So I went and I got $700 out of the bank, and I bought a drum kit, like a full-on Tama 5-piece drum set with cymbals and everything. And I set it up, and I started playing. And I can keep 2/4 time. If you throw it into 3s, and it's trouble. One of the things that I am hopeful for on the other side, when I'm in Jesus' place, is the differentiation of my hands and feet. My right side, when I go bup bup, I cannot make my foot not go bup bup. I want to be able to go bup bup and keep my foot just being normal. Or if I go bup bup with my foot, that my hand just goes normal, right? The thing is, I've given up. I've tried. I've YouTubed. I've gotten like drumming videos to help me do it. I've got all kinds of things to try to secure my ability in figuring out how to get that little half beat in with my foot. Just cannot do it. I slow it down. I have no confidence that it'll ever happen. You know that place in your life that you wish God would break in and fix? That place that you wish God would break in and just make right? That thing that you just keep wrestling with? That place where you lack discipline? Paul says to his friends in Philippi, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Keep bringing whatever it is in your life into the presence of God. Don't keep it. Don't give up on it. God is at work in and through you. And I don't know each of your lives to be able to say, oh, I know what it is in your life. I hope you're not pointing at me going, well, I know what it is in your life. But you know. I thought at 39 that I would have this thing in my life that eventually would just tear me up. And if it was never exposed in this life, then one day I would enter into heaven and I would meet God. And this is, playing it out. I would meet God and I would say to God, I know there was this stuff, this not so good stuff You can use other S words there, right? That just was painful. And then, but I did this good stuff over here. And then you can list things. I'm a really good person. I'm kind. I led someone to know your son, Jesus. I helped with a church plant. I worked in a food, you could list a bunch of good things. And so you begin to weigh it out. Where is your confidence? Is it in that you did more good stuff than bad stuff? And so then Jesus goes, yeah, let's give him a pass or her a pass. Let him in. That's not how it works. That's how other religions work. But our religion, our faith, our story is that we believe that God died for our brokenness. And he turns and heals that. And he is working on us to get it better. Ever have that computer that glitches and you just want to hit Control, Alt, Delete and reboot? You want that in your life where you go Control, Alt, Delete, and it's all better. Sometimes we at Crossroads can want that ourselves. Control, Alt, Delete, let's just start this thing over. We've had a hard time for a few years. No, don't get to do it. But I am confident, just as Paul is confident with Philippi, that he who began a good work in you, in us, it's gonna work out. One of my favorite East Indian actors in a movie, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel 2, he goes like this. And I am totally going to probably step on a toe here, but it's so good. He goes like this with his little East Indian bob. Everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, well, then it's not the end, right? It's going to be okay, people. God is doing this. Not Mike Yeoman, not Ingo, not Trish, not Rock. It's not the leadership team who is going to make this thing click. It is the confidence that the Creator and Redeemer of the universe is at work in and through us. Amen. Abounding in love. And Paul ends this little portion by saying, and this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. That you may abound more and more in love. Take you back to that first thing. Thankful for you. That when we connect with others who we recognize they are abounding in love, when we attach to them, we then participate in that and it accelerates. Now, I know Sky over here goes to youth group and it's awesome. You have a small group there? Well, who's your leader? Mr. Shepherd. Oh, that guy's a good guy. He's a teacher at Mount Vernon High School. And I've witnessed Mr. Shepherd being such a kind and abounding in love kind of guy. So I know my son's in that same small group with Sky, and I am so, when Isaac came home and said, hey, Mr. Shepherd is my small group leader, I was like, oh, that is awesome. Because I want my son to be more like Mr. Shepherd, who is more like Jesus. Who are you connecting to that causes you to become more like Christ? And if you are already that person who is abounding, who are you connecting to allow them to join you in that abounding love? Connie would love more leaders with the youth group. Young Life would. They meet on Sunday nights with junior high and then high school on Monday nights. We're hopeful that a before and after school program is going to be in that space up front, and Anthony and Sylvia Alvarez are going to be leading that up. They could probably use volunteers to help with this abounding love. This is us. This is good. And in the end, it is to the glory and praise of God. It's not me. It's not the leadership team. It's not even the Evangelical Covenant Church. It is that cross that reminds us that God's love reaches as far as the east is from the west. And when those arms wrap around you, you can be confident that what God starts in us, he will complete. And I love that this leads us then to the table. It leads us to a place that says, week in, week out, we are loved.